Okay, so this is the second part of the geologic history lecture. And this is what we stopped at. We stopped at supercontinents and sea level changes. So sea level changed many times during the early Phanerozoic, leading to periods of time when shallow seas were covering much of the land. Now, you have to kind of remember a little bit about what the Phanerozoic is. Now, I don't expect you to memorize everything, but we can go ahead and look at the time scale. So the Phanerozoic started 541 million years ago. So during the early Phanerozoic was the Paleozoic. And you had a lot of sea level changes where there were periods of time where sea level was really high and it covered a lot of the land. So when the sea level rises and covers land, it's called a transgression. When sea level falls, it's called a regression. Now we have evidence for shallow seas that covered the continents, and the shallow seas are called epiric seas. The spelling is right here, epiric. So the evidence is thick marine sediment deposits spread over large areas of land, and that includes limestone, shale, and sandstone. We also find marine fossils on land where normally you wouldn't have marine fossils because it's not an ocean, it's land. But if we find marine fossils on land, it tells us that the land used to be marine, used to be covered in seawater. Also ancient reefs and evaporite minerals like salt. So there is a video about a shallow inland sea. Again, those are called epiric seas. So this video clip refers to sediments deposited in a sea that existed 80 million years ago in what we now call Kansas. It's not the same time period we're talking about at this part of the lecture, which is the Paleozoic, but it is a good representation of sediments that form in shallow seas that covered the continent.
In western Kansas, a series of spectacular shapes burst up out of the plains. They're called monument rocks. And the raw material for these towering structures was formed more than 80 million years ago, the smallest of creatures. This place is amazing. I've been looking for just a few minutes, and here's a shell. It's an oyster shell. I've been finding these things all over the place. And this whole place is made of shells. There's really big ones, there's small ones, and even the chalk itself is made of microscopic shells. So why are there shells here? Answer, Kansas used to be covered by a massive inland sea. Over time, the giant oysters living on the seafloor were buried by billions of tiny plankton shells as they died and fell to the bottom of the sea. Layer after layer. Over millions of years, all that weight compressed them into chalk. When the sea finally drained, that chalk got left behind. Millions of years of erosion sculpted the chalk, leaving behind these curious outcrops that now surge skywards out of Kansas.
Okay. So during the Cambrian period, again, if you consult back here, Cambrian is 541 million to 485 million years ago. So during that Cambrian period, we had a sea that covered North America, and it was called the Sauk Sea, or scientists have called it the Sauk Sea. And it was the first major sea level transgression onto the North American continent in the Paleozoic. It covered most of North America except for a few large islands called the transcontinental arch. So if we zoom in, the transcontinental arch is right here. It goes down sort of the middle of the country. And that is land that was exposed above sea level. And everything else was pretty much underwater. And you could see the pink color, if you look at the legend on the bottom, the pink color is the beach. Those are beach sediments. The yellow is shallow water mud, and the purple is limestone. So all of that is sediment that was deposited during this period of high sea level that covered most of North America. Okay, so like most of the land in this country was covered by seawater. So we have marine type sediments covering most of the country. And here's some local evidence, and I say local because it's sort of close by. This is from the Delaware Water Gap area in New Jersey. So these are photos that I took of coral fossils. So this is during the Silurian, which I will show you on this time scale. The Silurian is 443 to 419 million years ago. So this is a different time period than what I was just talking about. But this is an example of evidence that we have that seawater covered the land, because coral fossils are usually related to shallow seawater. So if these corals were found in New Jersey, it tells us that that land used to be covered in shallow seawater. And it was tropical too. Then we have the Mesozoic, and that's the second era of the Phanerozoic. This is the age of the dinosaurs. This includes the Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous periods. During the early Mesozoic, or the Triassic, Pangaea began breaking apart. And this happened through continental rifting, which is something we talked about when we did the plate tectonics lecture. That the land starts to break apart and there is spreading and stretching of the crust. That is what is going on in the present day East African Rift Valley. That's continental rifting. We talked about that in plate tectonics. Okay, so Pangaea began to break apart, and that's when the Atlantic Ocean started to form. And then we continued having a breaking apart of Pangaea. And during the end of the Cretaceous, Australia and Antarctica separated, South America and Africa were separated, and Greenland separated from Europe. So the eastern coast of North America at this point was separated from Africa, and it has now become a passive continental margin far from any active plate boundaries. Organisms that survived the extinction at the end of the Paleozoic, or the Permian period, began to diversify. We had the development of gymnosperms, cycads, conifers, and ginkgos. Sorry, the gymnosperms developed earlier, but I'm sorry, I made a mistake there. The gymnosperms developed earlier, but during the Mesozoic, they became the dominant trees of the Mesozoic. Reptiles now became the dominant land animals. The first reptiles were small, but they evolved rapidly, particularly the dinosaurs. Now, dinosaurs are not the only reptiles, okay? So just keep in mind, dinosaurs were not the only type of reptiles. Okay, so the dinosaurs definitely evolved rapidly into being larger animals. Then we have a photo here, not a photo, a diagram of a large carnivorous dinosaur. Okay, this is like a Tyrannosaurus Rex, or it could be the Tyrannosaurus Rex's cousin. I forgot the name of it though. Okay, so we also had large herbivorous dinosaurs, flying reptiles, and also something called an Archaeopteryx, which is the predecessor of modern birds. So then this goes into the evolution of birds. And one dinosaur lineage, which had, it was small and had 2 legs, they were called theropods. They actually survived the extinction of dinosaurs, and they evolved into what we know of as birds today. Okay, so just to reiterate, there was one lineage of dinosaurs that was a small 2-legged dinosaur. That lineage of dinosaurs survived the extinction of dinosaurs. So actually, not every single dinosaur went extinct. We had this one group of dinosaurs that did not go extinct. And they evolved into modern day birds. So that's pretty cool. That's like a new discovery, actually. It's a pretty modern new discovery. So genetically, feathers are actually related to scales. So dinosaurs and reptiles have scales on their skin, but some dinosaurs were, recent studies have shown that some dinosaurs actually had feathers. And when you look at modern day birds, they have scales on their skin, on their legs and their feet. So I have these photos here of some birds with scales on their legs. Okay, so that's, again, a scale is related to a feather in terms of like the genes. It's like the same gene that makes scales and feathers. So this here, the Archaeopteryx, is a transitional fossil between dinosaurs and modern birds. So it has dinosaur-like properties, but it also has bird-like properties. So we consider it to be like a bird-like dinosaur. So the teeth are like dinosaurs. The tail and the size of its brain and its hind limbs are more like a dinosaur, but it had feathers and a wishbone like modern birds do. So this is like one of the evidence, this is an evidence of birds transitioning into transitioning from dinosaurs. If you could read more about this at this link here. Then what about mammals? During the Mesozoic, we had cynodonts, which were mammal-like reptile therapsids that gave rise to modern mammals. They had jaws and teeth like mammals, but they still maintained some features that reptiles have. The early mammals, there were only a few different types of them, and they were relatively small. And during the Mesozoic, we had the first appearance of flowering plants. Those are called angiosperms. Once we had flowering plants, it ended the dominance of the other two categories, the gymnosperms and the seedless plants like the ferns. So at the end of the Mesozoic, there was a mass extinction. Many reptile groups became extinct, and the mass extinction occurred 65 million years ago. MYA stands for millions of years ago. Millions of years ago. Okay, so 65 million years ago, we had this mass extinction. Let me just fix this. Dinosaurs seem to vanish from the rock record after 65 million years. A few types of reptile groups did survive, and that includes turtles, snakes, and lizards. 90% of plankton species in the ocean went extinct, and 75% of plant species went extinct. Scientists believe from different modes of evidence that a meteorite impact that hit the Earth at the end of the Mesozoic was the cause of this mass extinction. And the crater where this meteorite impact happened was the Chicxulub crater in the Yucatan. That's like near the Gulf of Mexico. So scientists think that material was blasted into the atmosphere after the meteorite impact, and that blocked sunlight, and then photosynthesis stopped, and then the food chains were disrupted. And there is evidence, there's a lot of evidence that this happened. Okay, so here is the Chicxulub crater. And I have here, the evidence is iridium-rich clay layer, shock quartz, and carbon from burned vegetation. So you'll have rock layers that are younger than 65 million years and rock layers that are older than 65 million years. And in the middle, there is a clay layer around different parts of the Earth with high amounts of iridium. Iridium is a metal that's associated with meteorite impacts, but it is rare to find it actually like as part of the Earth's crust. And there are various sites around the world where this thin clay layer exists with high amounts of iridium. So that is part of the evidence that there was a meteorite impact. Okay, so here's a photo. This is from the book, and it just shows you the older rocks and then the newer rocks and then the layer of iridium. I mean, it doesn't really look like anything, but they're just showing you in the picture that there's an iridium-rich clay layer. Then we have the Cenozoic. Much of the present-day geography developed during the Cenozoic. The eastern part of North America was now a passive continental margin. the Appalachian Mountains started to erode away and experience uplifts. Mammals now replace the reptiles as the dominant vertebrates on land. And we had a lot of diversification of mammals. So there were a lot of different types of mammals now. There were two major groups of mammals, the marsupials and the placentals. There was a third group that's not really a major group, but it's called the monotremes. Marsupials give birth to immature young, which then go into a pouch to finish development. They have short pregnancies, and examples are kangaroos and wombats and koala bears. And opossums. Opossums are the only marsupials that are native to the US. Then we have placentals. Those are mammals that use a placenta to nourish the embryo. They have long pregnancies. 90% of all mammals are placentals, including us. We are part of the primates. So primates all are placentals. Now, monotremes lay eggs. They are mammals that lay eggs. And that includes the duckbill platypus, shown here. The echidna, which is a spiny anteater, which, I don't know, it looks really cute. Isn't that cute? Look how cute this little animal is. The platypus is cute too, and so is the kangaroo. But this little echidna is so cute. Now, all monotremes live in Australia. Yeah, no, these I don't think are dangerous. Duckbill platypus is not dangerous. Echidna is not dangerous. I don't think it is. It looks a little bit like a hedgehog. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I have never been actually around a platypus, so I don't know if they're dangerous. You could look into it. Flowering plants continue to evolve, and that strongly influenced the evolution of birds and herbivorous mammals. Also insects. So you had like pollinators that were involved with the flowering plants. Then we had, right before the ice ages, you have the Miocene. Well, it's not right before, but here, I'll show you. The Miocene is 23 to 5.3 million years ago. Okay, so Miocene is here in yellow. Then the Pliocene happened, and then the Pleistocene. So the Pleistocene is when our ice ages happened. The Pleistocene is our ice ages. This picture here is the Pliocene, the Miocene. So this just shows you some Miocene mammals. Okay. And then we have Pliocene mammals. Now, some of these look kind of cool, like, for example, this deer-looking animal has like this horn thing sticking out of its snout, but then there's like these like other horn things sticking out of that. You see that? And then if you look in the background, there's something that kind of looks like an elephant, but it's not an elephant. The trunk is not the same. And then here's like an early horse. So early horses had toes. They didn't even have hoofs like they do today. They used to have toes. And then slowly they like lost the number of toes as the toes kind of changed into a hoof. So then by the Pleistocene, which is the ice ages, some mammals became very large. We had mastodons, mammoths, giant bison, giant sloths, and giant camels in North America. Now, by the way, you might be thinking like camels in North America? Camels actually are from North America. Like they're from here. And they migrated to Asia. But they're from the Americas, okay? Camels were here. Then they migrated elsewhere. And now we no longer have camels as a native animal here. So you even had giant birds that weighed like over 1,000 pounds. That's kind of crazy, right? They probably would be more like looking like dinosaurs. Like if you're walking around in the woods, like hiking, and you see a 1,000-pound bird, it's kind of scary. So nearly all of these large species were extinct by the end of the ice ages, actually. And the thoughts are that climate change, because at the end of the ice ages, it got warmer, and some of these really large animals were not able to adapt quickly to the warming climate. Also, humans came around and started hunting the animals. So there could have been overhunting by humans that killed off a lot of these animals as well. So here's another example of these large mammals. So here is a mylodon, which is a sloth that was like 6 meters long. Now 1 meter is like 3 feet. So this is a very long, very big sloth. So I would say like, if you're in a room, like a big room right now, think of how big that room is, right? Okay, so 1 meter is 3 feet. So this sloth was humongous. Okay, humongous. And it weighed more than 2 metric tons. You also had, you know, just a whole lot of other animals that were pretty large. And like I said, most of them went extinct at the end of the Pleistocene. Here are mammoths. You know, if you watch the cartoons, the Ice Age cartoons, you kind of get an idea of like some of the animals that are there. Okay, so here are some more Pliocene and Pleistocene mammals. So here, let me just go back a second, where it says armored mammals known as glyptodonts that weighed more than 2 metric tons. That's what weighed 2 metric tons, not necessarily the sloth. But the sloth was extremely long, big. Okay, so a glyptodont is all the way on the bottom. It kind of looks like a turtle or something like that in this picture. Maybe it would be more like an armadillo, but I'm just saying it looks like a turtle because it has a shell. But this would be like, maybe a little bit like an armadillo, but it was big. That's what they're saying could have weighed like 2 tons. Okay, and then next to it is a wolf. And then you had a saber-toothed tiger. Here's an anteater. Here's a bison, which is a buffalo. Here is a camel. You have a bear, a horse, you have a mammoth, a mastodon. The mammoth is bigger. This over here is a sloth. And then this says, that might be a rhinoceros, or maybe not. I'm not sure what that is. Rhinoceterio. Not sure what that is. Okay. Then we have primates. So the fossil record provides clues that primates evolved from small tree-dwelling, insect-eating mammals about 65 million years ago. Primate characteristics originated in the adaptations for living in trees. So you have limber shoulder joints for swinging from branch to branch. So like a lot of little kids like to play on the monkey bars at a park. That's because, you know, we are able to do that because we have limber shoulder joints that go like in circles. An elephant can't lift its arm and do monkey bars, okay? Primates are able to do something like that because of the way that our shoulders are designed. It's for living in trees and for swinging from branch to branch, okay? That's the adaptation. We actually have that adaptation, even though humans never lived in trees, but we have some of the adaptations that our early primate ancestors had. We also have agile hands that allow us to grasp stuff. So primates all have hands that are able to grasp tree branches and to open up and manipulate food. You know, like if I want to go open a banana, I could peel the banana open because we have thumbs, like I'm able to do that. You know, if you were to give a banana to a horse, it's not going to open, you know, peel open the banana with its hands. It doesn't have that. Okay, so our adaptations, our hands, our shoulders, the fact that we have eyes at the front of our faces, that's also an adaptation for life in trees because it helps with your depth perception. If you look at a horse or an elephant, their eyes are on the sides of their faces, like really, really separated, like on the sides. But that wouldn't be good for depth perception if you're swinging in branches in trees. It also helps with eye-hand coordination when you have your eyes closer together, okay? Just think about like, or a whale. A whale has its eyes like really far apart on the sides of its head, right? So a lot of our features are well suited for living in trees. But humans never lived in trees. Just our ancestors did. Our primate ancestors that we branched off from millions of years ago, but we branched off from early primates that did live in trees. Primates also have attentive parenting, which means they're more likely to have fewer babies at a time, usually a single birth. I mean, yes, we all probably know people who had twins or maybe triplets, and occasionally people have more than that. But naturally, usually primates will have one baby at a time, maybe two, occasionally three, right? But that allows for the mother to be more attentive. As opposed to like a cat, which could have like 5 kittens at a time, it's not going to be able to be as attentive to each kitten. Also, primates will nurture their offspring for a long time. So if you go to the zoo, you'll see like all the primates will have like, the moms have like babies hanging off of them. It's because they're taking care of the babies for a long period of time. You know, and humans do that too. You can't just leave a 1-year-old, you know, like a baby to like a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old. You can't just let them like run around and do whatever. You know, they need help, like doing a lot of stuff. So that's like a primate thing. As opposed to like, if you ever watch a documentary or something, like zebras and horses and deer, like they're born and within a few hours, they could even potentially get up and walk around. You know, primate babies can't do that. But there are mammals that like they're born and they can just get up and walk around. Okay, so again, humans never lived in trees, but we have traits, modified traits in some ways, that originated in our ancestors that did live in trees.
Your ancestors lived in trees all their life.
Yeah. I don't know if you meant to unmute and ask me something or if you're just speaking indirectly with it though.
It was very... No, I meant to unmute myself.
Okay. Yeah, so now this gets really interesting. So humans and chimpanzees branched from a common ancestral species about 6 or 7 million years ago. Let me kind of draw this out. Okay, so here's our common ancestor. Then humans and chimpanzees branched off from a common ancestor that we don't know what it is. We don't have in the fossil record evidence of what this ancestor was. Okay, we don't have that. But we know that at some point about 6 or 7 million years ago, this ancestor here branched off and evolved humans and evolved chimpanzees. So we did not evolve from chimpanzees. We evolved from the same ancestor that chimpanzees did. So a lot of times people get confused about this. They think that we came from chimpanzees. We share an ancestor with chimpanzees. It's a little bit of a different thing than what people think sometimes. Now, chimpanzees are apes. They're in the ape family. So we actually share a lot of DNA with chimpanzees. Okay, and then humans, when I say humans, I mean like the early humans, not necessarily the type of human that we are right now, the Homo sapiens. I'm talking about like early humans. So if anyone's ever gone to the Museum of Natural History, there are some early humans there. Now, early humans look very different than we do today. Early humans would have looked a little bit more like chimpanzees, a little bit. You know, their skull was a different shape. Their bodies were different. They were a lot shorter. So their body had a lot more in common with chimpanzees than we do now. Like our bodies are very different from chimpanzees. But the early humans would have been very similar to chimpanzees because they branched from the same ancestor. But today, chimpanzees and humans differ in that our brains are larger and we can walk upright. Walking upright is called bipedal. Any member of the human family is called a hominin. There were approximately, I did see your question about Neanderthals. Sorry, I should have mentioned that I saw that. There were approximately 20 species of fossil hominins that have been discovered. For example, one of the human species that has been found was the Neanderthal. At times, different species of hominins actually coexisted. So there were different groups of human species that actually lived at the same time. So this shows you millions of years ago, common ancestor of humans and great apes. Okay, so then the apes branched off, and we have chimpanzees, bonobo, and gorillas. And then the hominins branched off separately and then evolved separately. So we had very, very early humans, and notice how the skull is very different than ours. Okay, and then, moving through history, and then we have the Australopithecus africanus, 3 million years ago. And I'm just mentioning that because I'll show you a picture of that in a second. Then we had a Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, then Homo neanderthalensis, which is Neanderthals, and then Homo sapiens, which we are today. Now, Homo sapiens and Neanderthals lived together in Europe for a brief period of time. Okay, so there was a period of time where Neanderthals and Homo sapiens lived together. I believe it was Homo sapiens that lived with them. So actually, most humans today have, I think, 2% Neanderthal DNA, or we share 2% of our DNA with Neanderthals. I believe that's because of the mating that went on between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals when Homo sapiens reached Europe and mated, the interspecies mating, I guess. So there was a little bit of that going on. So most humans today, this is how it works. If the person has background of any DNA from Europeans, then they might have up to 2% of Neanderthal DNA. So it's like most of the world, the people, because like European DNA has like spread a lot around the world because of trade and colonialism, colonization, things like that, exploration, all that, conquering. So European DNA has spread around the world, right? So that's why most of the world people have up to 2% Neanderthal DNA. Okay. That's actually talked more about in like a biology class. So they go into that in there. It's pretty interesting though. Okay, so this is a representation of an Australopithecus afarensis. This is what I meant by that the early humans looked a little bit more like chimpanzees than they look like us. Okay, so that was about 3 million years ago. This was the afarensis, sorry. So it's a little bit older than the Australopithecus africanus. Okay, so yeah, like 3 million years ago, the humans looked like this. Okay, so the way that their face is a little bit more like ape-like rather than what we see humans looking like today. Okay, so then this on the left is a chimpanzee. That's the skeleton of a chimpanzee. The legs are shorter than the arms. Chimpanzees are able to walk upright, but they are also able to kind of like walk using their arms. Their skulls were not big enough for a larger brain like Homo sapiens have. We have a big skull opening that fits a larger brain. chimpanzees don't have the same amount of skull space. Then this is a fossil that has been named Lucy. Lucy is an Australopithecus afarensis adult woman, 3.2 million years old. That's an Australopithecus afarensis, which is, so this could have been like her face. Now this, I think, is a picture of the model that's in the Museum of Natural History. If you've ever been to that museum, there's like there's a couple there of Australopithecus afarensis people. There's a couple, like a man and a woman model. So I think this is a picture of that. I don't know if other museums around the world have a model. That's what I'm saying. This might be from that museum. I don't remember. So anyway, that's Lucy. So Lucy is an early human from 3.2 million years ago. So her legs and her hips and her spine was a little bit more bipedal, meaning she stood more upright than a chimpanzee does, right? Like her shoulders are a little broader. The hips are gonna be like more up and down rather than how they're set a little bit differently on a chimpanzee. Okay, so the skeleton's different than a chimpanzee. And then here's a modern human. So Lucy, I think, was like 3 feet tall. Okay, as a full-grown adult, she was like 3 feet tall. So the early humans were not extremely tall. Okay, and that's actually the last slide. So I'm going to stop the recording.